Rejoining the race, and the leaders are nearing the end of lap 2.
And Clark's relentless pressure seems to be paying off. Approaching the main arena up this nasty climb, he's got a slight lead now over Gould. The Schwinn rider has been joined by Baker, and Clark will know that if these two get together and start to work, his lead will quickly evaporate. And these tough conditions are stretching the riders. They're all on the limit. This group appears to have been demoralised by Baker's chase, and strung out behind him are Ford and Dowse. The Scot rider is also staying on the bike here, but Dowse, a multinational cyclo-cross champion, has opted to push the bike. Early pace setter Thackray is having a good ride in 6th, and he's getting good support from the local crowd. The Clark-Alexander household are having a good day, as the Klein rider is still away at the front of the women's race. She too seems to have extended her lead on the climb up Natalie Griff. However, in these conditions, mistakes are easy, and a slip could easily wipe out the advantage. Morel, who's now been joined by Robinson, will be aware of that, so these two should try to keep Alexander in sight, and by so doing, maintain the pressure. Behind them, Roberts is again struggling as we enter the middle of the race. This didn't stop her coming back to win the first round, however. But with Alexander out front, this could be harder. So it's the climb up Natalie Griff where the gaps are opening. And here's Clark on lap 3, inflicting damage. And you can just see Gould and Baker in the distance. Clark has 3 times been the national hill climb champion, and he's also a former milk race King of the Mountains winner. So he's at home up here. The two Sheffield riders are still wheel to wheel, and the former teammates will have to form a new alliance if they're to reel in the leader. Meanwhile, Ford seems to have settled down, and he's now chasing hard on his own. Dowse is producing a good ride for his new sponsors KHS, and looks like he's moving clear of Thackray, who is struggling on the climb. The women are halfway through their 3rd lap, and Alexander is still unable to open the kind of lead she's used to in Britain. The weather is deteriorating, and so will the course, which seems to be working to the Saracen riders' advantage. In fact, that's not rain, but it's hailstones, and you can see just how heavy they're coming down as Morel pursues Alexander down Dargate Slack. Robinson has lost touch with Morel, who's still in good form after her recent 7th in Belgium. But Robinson's teammate is now completely in control of the men's competition as he heads down the gully for the 4th time.
Come on, Barry.
The gap to the chasers is over a minute, and they have now become a trio as Ford has joined forces. But in these conditions, they're really going to have to be hungry for victory to chase Clark down, as the cold will be sapping their strength and enthusiasm. Oh, and Gould has gone down, so you can see just how slippery it's becoming. He doesn't seem to be hurt, but that's given Baker and Ford an opportunity, so Gould is going to have to dig deep to get back on terms. Thackray has moved up to 5th, so he's having an excellent ride, which will delight his local sponsors, Pace. He's a minute down on the chasers, but he's pulling clear of Dowse, and look at the face on Steve, showing his appreciation of the conditions. Heading out of the single track and across the road, Clark is well away, and Ford and Baker will now be working on tactics in the race for 2nd, while Gould seems to have lost his rhythm after that tumble, and he's beginning to fall back very quickly. Thackray may even have him in view, and he'll be keen to notch up a famous scalp. Chris Young is loving the inclement conditions and has now passed Douse to move into 6th spot. Nearing the end of their 3rd lap, and Alexander is forced to dismount on this section for the first time as she passes one of the back markers in the men's race. This is frustrating for the British champion, for it's on the uphills that she can use her great strength to drop morale. And back in 3rd is still Louise Robinson, and the pattern of the women's race has now more or less formed. Just like the first round, it seems that the women's podium places will be decided on the final lap. And as they line up another descent, I'm sure they'll be feeling the cold, so none of them will want to take too many chances, as the gaps are still very small. At the end of his 4th lap, Clark is still forcing the pace, but his saddle looks as though it's slipped, and he'll want to sort that problem out. Winner in Bilthwell, Sian Roberts, is well off the pace in this round. In fact, she trails the leaders by over 3.5 minutes. Ford is also being forced to run this climb, and that's given Baker the chance to move back into 2nd. And for all the riders, the reliability of their machines is a major factor in the mud. And Thackray has moved up to 4th. He's past Gould, who's apparently pulled out because of the cold. Clark now on his final lap. He won 1 round last year and 2 in '93, and this could take him into the lead overall in the series. That's if his former teammate Baker can finish ahead of Ford. And here's Thackray, still with work to do. He's over a minute down on that pair. In the bottom of Tom Milner's grain, Clark seems to be having problems. His lead over Ford is now down to a minute. But the surprise is that Thackray is now up to 3rd, having passed Baker, who has now also pulled out because of the weather, which, as you can hear, is foul. Up the final climb then for the last time, and Clark is looking back anxiously because Thackray is now right behind him, and Ford is also just back in the woods. Clark is struggling up here, while the pace rider is getting all the support from the crowd, and now he's just about to go past the rallyman, who finally surrenders the lead. He's had the head of the race for so long. You've got to feel for Clark. The problem is the saddle, and this man always seems to incur mechanical problems. I don't think Ford can catch them, but it's all come back together, and heading for the line, Thackray takes his first senior national win, and he's getting a fantastic response. There he is over the line, and he's loving it, and Clark comes home out of the saddle. He hasn't got a saddle, has he, to take the 2nd spot. Clark looks back to see his fiancée Alexander coming on for her first win of the season. But there's been a final lap change behind her as Robinson has snatched 2nd from Morel, and rumour has it she was suffering from cramp on the final lap.
Well done, Deb.
The conditions took a number of victims apart from Barry and Deb, with both Gould and Baker pulling out because of the cold. So the final results look like this, with Caroline returning to form, but not yet at full strength, as Louise and Deb kept her within sight. But Richard must be the happiest rider of the day, with a career best result that will make the others take notice. So Sian and Deb are opening a gap in the overall, which could enable either to take the series despite missing some rounds. While in the men's, Gary takes the lead, but with both himself and Barry missing rounds, Chris and Richard are well placed for the series title.
I think it's good. I haven't sunk in properly yet, but I'm pleased.
Did you know from the start you were on form?
I didn't really. I was really sort of struggling at the start, and then I sort of got back going. Then, like, all of a sudden, I just felt really good, and I don't know. Oh, everyone else slowed down. I'm not sure.
I didn't realise Richard was catching me so quickly, and I was having a bit of trouble with my saddle on the last 3 laps, and I kept stopping and tightening it up. And the last lap, my fingers were too cold to tighten it up, so it was getting looser and looser. And then he caught me on the last little climb and just went straight by, and that was it really. I was just trying to get to the finish with a loose saddle.
I didn't really get into it because I didn't have a great deal of power, but I seemed to stay with the riders that I should be with, so that was quite good. And then basically the last 2 laps was just a battle of who could persevere. It was so cold and everyone was so uncomfortable. Some guys got off and the rest of us just carried on. So.
I knew it would be tough today because I wasn't really going and the course didn't suit me that well. There wasn't really any climbing, which is always my strength. And you know, riding round by yourself, it's difficult. You're the carrot, and if they can see you, then it's just a real good incentive to keep going, and you don't know what's going on behind you.
I had a bit of a bad crash at the first round of the BMB, and I badly sprained my ankle, and it's been sort of in the background for the last 3 races. But today it felt pretty good. In fact, my feet were that numb I couldn't feel it. It was that cold.
The last 2 steep climbs, I got off to run at the bottom of the first one. Both legs, calves just cramped solid from the cold, and there was nothing really that I could do. I mean, I was trying to like walk up it a bit like a duck really, but you know, I was going so slowly, and I knew Louise wasn't that far behind, but I figured if I could have like, you know, got up without being cramped, I would have made it to the finish. But as it was, she caught me, so it was a bit disappointing.
Deb will be looking for revenge next week as the series crosses the border to Scotland.